Hey everybody, James with Love My Pups and My Breeder Supply. Today we are going to talk about degenerative myelopathy, DM, specifically in French Bulldogs. So the rest of you who have other kinds of dogs, you can also have problems with DM, but this is not about your other breeds. This is specifically about French Bulldogs. So here in the last, 5 years, people have been doing a 4-panel health test on Frenchies. And one of the things that crops up quite a bit is DM, degenerative myelopathy. So degenerative myelopathy is like Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS. ALS is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. And what it does is it affects the spinal cord, and basically, it's a non-curable disease that causes paralysis. And so in French Bulldogs, it would cause paralysis, typically of the lower part of the dog, its legs. And it is a degeneration of the spinal cord. You get some kind of fatty substances in there along with the spinal cord, and that causes a problem. So the question is, how many dogs are affected by it, and what is the outcome for those dogs? Well, it turns out that DM does not affect French Bulldogs. I'm going to repeat that again. DM does not affect French Bulldogs. This is an absolute bunch of bunk that's been taught to and told to us French Bulldog owners, and we need to understand what the reality of DM is. Okay. So what the heck am I talking about? How do I know this? Well, what you should do is, if you don't believe what I'm telling you, you should go do a little research yourself. But there's been a number of peer-reviewed studies. When I say peer-reviewed, this means that scientists are putting a paper in places like Science magazine, and then this is then looked at by other people in the field, peer-reviewed. It's not just quackery. There's plenty of quackery out there, I promise you. Anything that I read about, it needs to be peer-reviewed before I have any substance to it. This is peer-reviewed. And so in Missouri University is one of the places that I found out in 2007, they did a study of DM in breeds in general. And up to some breeds, 90% of the dogs are affected by DM. So DM, you can test for it. And so DM, you have to have, here's DM, 2 copies of DM. If you have 2 copies of DM, then that dog can be affected by it. It turns out that in French Bulldogs, you don't only have to have 2 copies of DM, but there is an unknown, but another area of the genome that has to also have a flaw for DM to affect the dog. And it doesn't happen. So what they found out was that there's been a number of reports now where they have had huge studies. One of them was done in France at the Alphonse University in France between 2002 and 2016. Here's what happens is that our French Bulldogs do succumb to various problems to do with hip dysplasia, spinal cord disc dislocation, where they can get paralysis of the lower part, the back legs. The problem is those are never, ever, ever caused by DM. French Bulldogs do not succumb to a degenerative myelopathy. They just don't get it. But what happens is, us as French Bulldog owners have a dog that we find out has 2 copies of DM. And then at some point later on in its life, 9, 10 years old, it starts to have problems with its back end, and we assume that DM is the cause of it. But it's not. DM's not the cause of it. What the cause of it is disc compression problems, spinal problems, gait problems. So how do you know it's not DM? It's really simple. Well, it's not really simple. That's part of the problem. But the diagnosis of DM requires a cross-section of the spinal cord to be stained and looked up under a microscope. And what you see some fatty deposits in there, just as you see Lou Gehrig's disease. And that is a diagnosis. The problem is, almost all of these dogs are never having that pathology done. So we just assume it's DM, but in fact it was something completely different. So let's go look at some numbers here. So, How many dogs in the French Bulldog world have a single copy of DM? And my girlfriend sucks. And the answer to that is about 25, a quarter to a third of all Frenchies, if tested, will have a copy of DM. It's a huge number. It's a huge number. And so if you think about this, it gets 2 copies of DM to make a dog maybe have a problem with the actual disease. So if you take a low number of a quarter, and a quarter, you end up with 1/16 of all Frenchies will be positive for potentially having the disease, DM. And what we've been led to believe is that those dogs, after about 9 to 10 years old, could show signs of degenerative myelopathy and then have problems later on in life. Well, there's a couple of things that I always thought. The first one, well, here's the first thing, is that I get involved in a huge amount of breedings. I mean, I don't know what the number is, but you know, it's got to be well over 1,000 breedings. I mean, I do a huge amount of this. I mean, I ship out Frenchie semen literally every day, you know, something between 1 and as many as 7 samples every day. And I've been doing this for a long time. So I have been responsible for other people's dogs, thousands and thousands of puppies. And I've been doing this long enough that I should be hearing things about people's dogs who they think got DM, because I'd be concerned about this because I don't want to be involved in breedings that have caused problems. I just don't hear it. So it's like, okay, 1/16 of all dogs could potentially succumb to degenerative myelopathy. It doesn't sound right to me. And after you start looking at the research, and by the way, a really good place to go look at this is just go on Google and Google DM in French Bulldogs and see what you find. And what you will find is one particular article that's very good. Let's see if I've got a better pen here. One article that was very, very good at explaining all this. And that is Dogzine, dogzine.nl. So go look at that article. It's a peer-reviewed article. Go look at that. But again, you know, here's the deal. This is why this is a problem, is that we are not breeding lots of French Bulldogs because we think we have a problem with DM. And we just flat don't. There has never, ever, ever been a case of DM that has been confirmed by a pathological slide where a piece of the spinal cord of the dog that died has been sectioned and looked at on a microscope to see that it has the equivalent of ALS. 0, not a single one. Nothing, not one. So DM is a problem in some dogs, and those people and those breeds should be concerned about it. But I'm telling you, it is just absolutely never ever has happened one documented single case of it in any French Bulldog anywhere in the whole world. So this is what the problem is. The first thing is that we're then passing on dogs that are great dogs that should have been used in breeding programs, and we pass them because they had a copy or 2 copies of DM. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is there have been dogs that we have diagnosed with DM incorrectly, and then have decided this is an incurable disease and euthanized the dog, where in fact it was never DM in the first place, and that dog could have been fixed by having that better treatment, a correct treatment. So there are things that you can do for things like slip discs and things like this in dogs that you cannot do if the dog had DM. Okay, so what else have I got to add to this? Not much else. But I'm telling you, this DM is a bunch of rubbish. And I hold some of the people responsible, the people who are doing the tests, who are offering the tests. They're just making the money on giving us these tests, and they're not telling us the truth behind it. I'll give you an example of this that I think is a problem. The chocolate test in French Bulldogs. Almost all French Bulldogs cannot be tested genetically for the presence of the chocolate gene, the B gene. And so those, and I've got a ton of them. And I mean, those dogs, we know they're chocolate dogs because they have chocolate offspring, they have lilac offspring, then they have the red eye glow that I've talked about and other things. But we go and get a test done, it comes back from Animal Genetics or UC Davis, and it says big B, it's not a chocolate dog. And I get into this all the time with people who think, oh, I don't have a chocolate dog. Well, in fact, they do have a chocolate dog. And there's nothing on the website that I have seen, that on either of those genetic testing websites, where they tell you we cannot test for chocolate in the majority of French Bulldogs. You can test it for this Isabella, it's a testable chocolate. But they don't tell us about this, and they don't tell us about this. And it POs me. It's like, come on, folks, don't just take our money and give us information that's incorrect. So I'm just going to repeat this. DM is not a disease that affects French Bulldogs. Quit worrying about it. You're missing out on things that you could be doing to fix dogs that have got problems, and you're missing out on potentially breeding dogs that would be absolutely perfectly fine, because they will never, ever, ever get DM. Hey, there's lots of videos to watch. Be nice to your dogs, and thanks for looking at mine. Bye, everybody.